Varmt välkomna till premiären av Investor Targets pressträff. Idag ska vi presentera ett kanadensiskt börsnoterat bolag som fokuserar på prospektering och utveckling av guldprojekt i östra Afrika. Bolaget heter Tembo Gold och med fyndigheter som är strategiskt belägna vid redan utvecklade guldfält ska jag säga, av världsklass. Eftersom dagens bolag är engelskspråkigt kommer presentationen nu att fortsätta på engelska. Hello, welcome, and if you tune in to Pressträff from Canada, a fairly good morning to you. If you watch this live, you can interact with the management by asking questions in the live chat. We will deal with the questions at the end of this presentation. You can use English or Swedish at your own leisure. Pressträff is a cooperation between Direct Studios, Investor Target and the presenting company, all brought to you by Scandinavian Alliance. For more information about Scandinavian Alliance or any of the above, please go to their respective website. So, with all the disclaimers under the belt, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Marc Cernovitch, Director, and Simon Benstead, CFO of Tembo. So, gentlemen, please go ahead.
Beautiful. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to learn a little bit more about Tembo Gold. If you could please fast forward to slide number 3. Great, thank you. So Tembo Gold is a rapidly growing gold exploration and development company. We're listed on the TSXV Venture. We also have representation on the Frankfurt exchanges. Tembo leverages our unique position and experience, and the company is principally focused on growth and consolidation in the highly prolific and prospective Lake Victoria Gold District in Tanzania. Tembo is, as you can see by this lovely little diagram that Marc Cernovitch has put together. I guess I first should tell you who I am. My name is Simon Benstead. I am the CFO, Managing Director and largest individual shareholder of Tembo. And Marc Cernovitch, like myself, is a capital markets professional with over 25 years of experience. Marc's one of the founding shareholders of Tembo, and currently, together with myself, we work with David Scott, who is the CEO in Tanzania, and we effectively run the business and deliver the strategy. We're going to talk to you today about how Tembo checks all of the boxes that you would be looking for in a junior gold investment. At the end of the day, that's why we're all here. We're here to evaluate investments and to make money. When you're looking to invest in a junior gold company, you want to be in a very friendly mining jurisdiction. It turns out that Tanzania is the safest, most secure, most stable jurisdiction in all of Africa. I mean, over the last number of years with new leadership, it's quickly turned into the jewel of Africa, and that's evident by all of the international capital that's been flowing in the last number of years. You want to have proximity to a major deposit. The Tembo project is directly adjacent to one of the biggest deposits in Africa, which is Bulyanhulu, which is owned by Barrick, approximately 20 million ounces, high-grade deposit. Marc will show you later in the presentation how their geology runs into our ground, and how we're very excited about that. You want to have a major gold company involved in your story, and we're grateful and fortunate to have the validation that comes with Barrick making an equity investment in Tembo approximately a year and a half ago. So Barrick today owns approximately 3% of Tembo. As you can imagine, did a tremendous amount of due diligence before making that investment. Marc will tell you a little bit more about that later in the very exciting deal that we have with Barrick Gold. Grade is always king. I mean, you're looking for relatively shallow, relatively high grade, and that's the Tembo project and also the Imwelo project, which Marc will tell you about later. You definitely want your junior gold company to be very closely held by management. We're very fortunate. I'll show you on the next slide more specifically about our cap table, but we have insider ownership, very closely held. All of the management and directors, are large stock owners, an experienced management team. Marc and I have been building businesses from a capital markets perspective for over 25 years. We both have long resumes that I won't bore you with, but varied experience and have a lot of experience building businesses from the ground up. Combine that with David Scott, who is our CEO based in Tanzania, former Barrick general manager at Bully and Hulu. And then we have a very, very deep, team of advisors and experienced people in our group. Strategic industry partnerships. We'll talk a little bit more about our partnership with Taifa Mining Group and Rostam Aziz, who is the richest man in Tanzania. If you refer to some of our most recent press releases, you'll see that we've announced a transformative transaction with Taifa Group and with Rostam Aziz as part of this acquisition that we've recently made of Imwelo. Access to capital, we'll talk a little bit about that, but primarily it comes with the support of this strategic partnership, which allows us to get into production. Next slide, please. So our cap structure, as I mentioned before, it's very, very tightly held. We have management and insiders, including Mark and myself and David Scott, the CEO, who together own approximately 23% of the company. We have Taifa, who is recently signed a binding term sheet, which will see them, when the transaction closes, owning approximately 26%. You can see that we've got three institutions. Actually, they're not listed here, but Phoenix Gold Fund, Concept Capital, which is a German family office, and 49 North, which is a Canadian family office. They own approximately 16%. Long-term shareholders, very, very supportive. Lake Victoria Gold, LVG, they own approximately 16% after we acquired them by issuing Tembo shares at 22 cents. And then, of course, retail, which is at 16%, which is something we're now beginning to tell the story and get our exposure so that we can increase our retail shareholding. Next slide, please. So it's important to talk a little bit about Tanzania. Often when one is considering making an investment in Africa, the inevitable pushback is, oh, is Africa stable? Is Africa safe? And I think it's a mistake to brush all of that Africa with one brush. I think that Western Africa has been the darling over the last decade or two, but it's now turning out to be quite unstable. There seems to be a new military coup in West Africa announced every week. But Tanzania has a 40-year track record of democracy. Tanzania is led by a very moderate Muslim woman who literally on her first day of taking office declared that she wanted to have business back in Tanzania, and she's followed through with that. You now have Barrick, who is by far the biggest contributor to the Tanzanian treasury, spending over $3 billion over the last few years, hiring Tanzanians, paying taxes, building infrastructure, paying hundreds of millions of dollars in salaries, and generally making the country a better place than it was before they got there. You have the stable political environment. We're seeing lots of international capital flow into Tanzania, backing all sorts of projects, whether it's liquid natural gas, whether it's graphite, whether it's gold, silver, and other rare metals. We're seeing coal investments, diamond investments. The mining industry continues to grow through a number of ongoing and pending investments, as I mentioned, and this more leading to even more international investment and the perception that Tanzania is a safe and stable place in which to invest. I'm going to turn it over now to Mark, who will tell you a little bit more about our projects, both Tembo and Imwelo. If you could go to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Simon. So, as Simon was just, discussing, Tanzania from a business perspective, has been a very safe and good place, particularly for the mining sector. On African standards, it kind of jumps between third and fourth position in terms of being the third or fourth largest gold producer in Africa. And one of the reasons for that is, historically, Tanzania gold production has been dominated by the majors such as Barrick and AngloGold Ashanti. And that's because the deposits in Tanzania tend to be multi-million ounce, or what we like to refer to in industry as elephant deposits, elephant-sized deposits. And just to give you we have two assets I'm going to talk about today. The first one is our Tembo property, which has historically been our flagship asset. We've conducted over 50,000 meters of drilling on the Tembo property, spent close to $30 million US, with exceptional results. And what really attracted us to the Tembo asset when we acquired it was the proximity to Barrick's Bulyanhulu deposit, which, as Simon mentioned earlier, is one of Africa's largest gold deposits, which is sitting around 20 million ounces. And if you look at that diagram there, in the bottom right-hand corner, that is Barrick's mining license, and that's where the Bulyanhulu deposit sits. It's an incredibly high-grade deposit, and we've seen very similar type geology and results on the Tembo ground. Most of our drilling to date has been focused on three areas, which I'll go into in a little second. But we are still making new discoveries on the property through our own exploration, but also through the artisanal miners who have been historically active and continue to be active on the property. So we at the moment we're not drilling. We're just in the process of doing our first 43-101 compliant maiden resource, and we expect to have those results in the next few months. We also, as Simon mentioned, recently conducted a transaction with Barrick where they acquired what we considered 6 non-core licenses as part of our land package, and those are the licenses that are grayed out on this image, and we are 100% focused on what is contained in that yellow license, which is where we've done most of our historical work. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of kind of our exploration results to date. If you look at the bottom right of that slide, that's the Bulyanhulu deposit. In those solid red lines is where Barrick is currently producing. But that whole kind of, that whole vein system and geological structure where all the gold is contained at Bulyanhulu runs to the northwest and runs right into our core license, the Tembo ground. So we had immediate success when we started drilling at Tembo with some what are kind of considered bonanza type grades in the industry, with holes such as 15 meters at almost 23 grams, 4 meters at 10 grams, 8-9 meters at 11 grams. Those are very nice, very nice grades to have and are economic. So most of our drilling to date has been on 3 target areas, being the Nagula 1 target, the Nakagwe Village target, and the Nakagwe East target. The Bulyanhulu deposit runs for roughly 5 kilometers in strike length, 2 meters wide, down, and they're currently mining down to almost 2,000 meters. The drilling that we've done to date at Tembo, we've really only started scratching the surface, with most of our drilling being done between surface and 200 meters, with a few holes that go down to 300 meters. But in our opinion, we have the potential for not only one, but multiple multi-million ounce deposits on the Tembo ground. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the transaction we did with Barrick. If you look at the pretty picture on the right, you'll see the yellow claim, which is the ground that we retained. As I mentioned earlier, we sold the 6 surrounding non-core claims to Barrick about just under 2 years ago. We received, we didn't want to do the normal type transaction where, when a major comes into to a junior, where they will effectively take control of the whole project, end up being an operator. Those projects tend to move very slowly and don't allow us to create the same type of shareholder value. So we came up with an industry I would consider a unique and somewhat of a hybrid transaction, where we sold them our 6 non-core claims where we had done very little work, but Barrick was very interested in exploring, so we could focus our efforts on our core claim. So Barrick paid us $6 million US for those 6 non-core claims, but we retained some very nice upside on those claims, where when Barrick has to spend a minimum of $9 million over the next 4 years exploring and drilling on those claims, and then we get paid on discovery. Normally, what you see with deals with majors is that you would end up with some sort of royalty or an interest where you will get paid once they build a mine, which typically will be 8-10 years out. So we get paid on discovery, and that includes all ounces, including indicated and inferred ounces, once Barrick generates a resource estimate, which they have to do after spending the $9 million or 4 years, whatever comes first. So there's no time limit on that. We get paid once they generate resource estimates, and we do have the ability to force resource estimates. So those payments are on a sliding scale. It's $20 an ounce on the first 1 million ounces, 10 on the second 1 million ounces, and then 5 thereafter. So potential contingent payments up to $45 million from Barrick over the coming years. So simultaneous to that, they made a $1.5 million equity investment into us, and that's how they do their ownership. So Barrick spent the first year kind of doing ground truthing, a little bit of geophysics, testing some of the artisanal workings. But the real work that Barrick is going to do on those claims is really just starting now, with drilling taking place. And as you can see from the slide, those little blue dots are where they're focused, and most of them are right up against our property boundary. And their thoughts is that the geology runs from Bulyanhulu right through our property and continues to the north. So we're very excited about the drilling that Barrick's about to do, because one of the key elements of our deal with them, junior miners live and die on news flow. And part of our deal with Barrick is they're obligated to share all of the technical data that they generate from their work on our property, and we are allowed to announce those results to the market on a quarterly basis. So we're eagerly awaiting results from Barrick's drilling. And then, furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, we're about to generate a maiden resource. After evaluating that, we will then determine where we want to focus further exploration and drilling on the Tembo property. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the next project, next slide, please. The next project I want to discuss is our Emwelo project. One of the challenges of being an exploration company is that it's extremely capital intensive. Drilling is expensive, and you tend to go through this cycle of raise money, drill, then have to dilute again to continue drilling. So with all the kind of recent activity and upswing in development in Tanzania, we made the decision to not just focused on the exploration potential of the Tembo property, but to try and find an asset that was, near-term production potential, so we could start generating some revenues. So we just recently announced, you can see details in the press release that was put out, I believe, on August 10th, on the acquisition of the Imwelo property, as well as the neighboring project. But both these projects combined have a total of just over 800,000 ounces. And they are located, if you remember what Simon said, you want to be in similar geology and next to a major deposit. We're in the same geological setting as AngloGold Ashanti's Geita Gold Mine, which is an over 8 million ounce deposit that has been in production for many years and still growing. And we have very similar geology there. Our project is the project on the left. Contained within that little yellow box is where we're going to be focusing first, because that is now a mining license. The previous owners of the Imwelo project effectively advanced this under Australian regulations, being JORC regulations, but they effectively took this through to feasibility. And have a fully permitted operation with near-term production potential. Next slide, please. So just a kind of a technical overview of the Imwelo project. Looking at that slide within the yellow box to your right is where we will be focusing our first efforts on. To bring that asset into production. The processing plant, has effectively been fully designed. First 10 years of mining has been planned out. As I mentioned earlier, we're effectively fully permitted. This is starting at open pit with some very nice grades the first 18 months at just under 4 grams per ton, with a plan of starting at 12,000 ounces of production per annum, and then during starting in kind of year 2.5, expanding the processing facility to be able to grow to 24,000 ounces per annum of production. But again, there's still the previous owners were really just focused on getting this into production on a small to mid scale, but there is still tremendous upside potential on this ground, because they've only drilled down to 70 meters. Whereas if you look at Geita and some of the other neighboring deposits, they are producing down to 300, 400, 500 meters. So we're highly confident that we'll be able to, with some infill drilling and some deeper drilling, continue to grow this deposit to what we expect to be a multi-million ounce deposit over time. Next slide, please. So kind of a financial summary of what came out of the feasibility studies. And again, this is just on the Imwelo project, which contains roughly 300,000 ounces where the feasibility studies have been done. But gold production, once we break ground, we'd be looking at pouring first gold within 12 months, with an expansion to 24,000 ounces per annum during year 2-3. We're looking at 3-year average operating costs of under $1,000 an ounce, which is quite attractive when we're sitting at $1,900 gold. We're looking at an NPV of roughly 25 million, an IRR of 72%, and somewhere between 85 and 90 million dollars in EBITDA over the first 8 years of production. So we'll be able to take those cash flows and essentially self-fund further exploration, and growth at Imwello, but also at Tembo. Next slide, please. Simon?
Yeah, so I'm going to pop in here, and really what this comes down to as we wrap up the presentation, everybody, is to talk about, why gold and why now. I mean, this is a transformational moment for Tembo. We are evolving into a vehicle for aggressive growth and consolidation, as I said in my opening remarks, leveraging our unique experience and position in Tanzania. But why now when it comes to gold? Like JP Morgan once famously said, gold is money and everything else is credit. You need hard currency for stability. Gold reacts to an underlying breakdown of trust and confidence in governments and central banks. And we're seeing money printing that is virtually unprecedented in modern history from every central bank in the world. And what that does is it obviously presents a great setup for gold to start move in a not dissimilar way to the way it moved in the 1970s. Before I move on to the slide, just want this slide here talks about really what those goals look like from a perspective of production and cash flow. What we're transforming from a single asset that really is an exploration asset where you raise money, drill, dilute, raise money, drill, dilute in a never-ending death cycle. We're transforming now into a vehicle for production and for positive cash flow, which could then be put back in to help us explore more. Next slide, please. This will be the last slide. So I talked about gold and how it's really the only thing that has maintained purchasing power over the last 5,000 years of human history. I mean, the dollar is really only a construct of the last 150 years. Before that, it was the pound. Before that, it was the peseta. But ultimately, paper currencies end up becoming worthless, and their purchasing power ends up getting whittled down to nothing. We've seen that. We've seen the talk of inflation. We're seeing that other countries, particularly these BRICS countries, led by China, Russia, and India, are doing everything they can to circumvent the weaponization of the US dollar. And so if you can accept it, having a bet on gold, which is quite similar to a bet on Bitcoin because it's all about decentralized power, you have to ask yourself, how do you express that view? And I think you need a vehicle to express that view that will give you outsized returns. With gold today trading around 1850, if it was to go to 3,000, you'd have a nice 50% gain. But if gold was to go to 3,000, you'd see companies like Tembo going up 10-fold, 20-fold or more. That's where the leverage is. You need to have juniors that are very, very well run, as we laid out in the opening slide. You need close to be held by the management. You need to have the seniors involved. You need to be in a great jurisdiction. And I'll leave you with the fact that Tembo checks all of those boxes. We have deliberately built this company, to address every issue that one would have in making an investment in junior gold. And with that, I think we can open up to questions.
Simon, Mark, thank you for that, and I really appreciated the run through on the historical side here, which I think is very interesting, and that gives me a segue into one of my questions here. When you are prospecting, how important is the spot price of gold as it is now, because you're mentioning the future here with 5 years ahead and so on. What should we as investor read into a gold price today?
Well, I mean, my first comment on that would be that you want to have a lot of room in your margin. And, as Mark showed on one of the slides, I mean, our all-in sustaining costs based on our feasibility study at Imwello are below $1,000 an ounce all-in sustaining costs. So with gold today at 1,850, there's plenty of margin, and there is a fair amount of protection on the downside. But obviously, we're making these investments and we're making these bets because we believe gold is going higher, and that's where the leverage really comes in. Because, for example, even in year one, where we predict that we're going to produce approximately 12,000 ounces, every $100 move in gold is an extra $1.2 million in free cash flow with virtually no extra costs associated with it. So that's where the leverage is. You can essentially, when you've got low costs, have that, have the bearing of that leverage as gold goes higher. But we feel that we're in an inflationary environment, and it's supportive of gold.
And as you mentioned, the inflation, when it comes to your different projects here, do you feel the pain, or do you feel the inflation as it comes to your cost side?
So I mean, there's, in this exploration phase, I mean, we definitely feel it. You feel it a little less than you do when you're fully in production. But I mean, one of the things we did to mitigate that, we updated, when we were in the process of acquiring the Mwelo projects, which had everything costed out in its in the pre-feasibility and feasibility studies that were done in 2017 and then updated in 2021. Because of this inflationary environment, we updated all those costs. So yes, we are seeing pressures for materials, for labor, but we're also seeing sustained high gold prices. So it balances itself out.
Yeah.
And the trick is, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, and at the end, higher inflation must really put the pressure upwards on the gold price. So you will get it back on the swings.
Exactly.
How did you get access to the assets that you have? Is there a Barrick connection? Because I get the feeling that you also have an excellent and very unique deal with them as it comes to getting paid for discovery. But first things first, how did you get hold of your access, and who were you up against in the bidding?
So the Tembo project. The Tembo project essentially came from through our CEO, David Scott. David is a South African geologist by training. When Barrick bought the Bulyanhulu deposit by taking over another junior company called Sutton Resources, they bought that deposit, and it was roughly 3 million ounces. David was part of the team that was brought in and hired by Barrick to do further exploration on it. And in a period of 18 months, they grew that deposit from 3 million ounces to 15 million ounces. That was 25 years ago, and David has been in Tanzania ever since. After Barrick, he moved over to another company called Shanta Gold, which at that time was a junior. They were working on their first deposit. He was their managing director, saw them through their feasibility study and the beginning of construction. That's when, at that point, we hired David, and because of his experience at Bulyanhulu, and given our proximity to Bulyanhulu, we worked with David to acquire that project and bring it forward. Similar, on the Mwelo project, when we decided, David has been in country for 25 years. Has worked on many projects over the years. When we decided we wanted to move into a development project and a production project, it was the phone call to David saying, David, we need to find a more advanced asset. He had a database of them, and then we started negotiating from there. But it's also, when we're talking about the bigger picture and growth and consolidation, Tanzania has been dominated by the majors, and it's been largely underexplored. And the majors need to see a certain size deposit for it to move the needle for them and move forward. So there's a number of assets, and Mwelo is a perfect example, that are advanced projects that are incredible quality projects, but aren't quite big enough for the majors to sink their teeth into at this point. So yes, there is a good relationship with Barrick, but it's also knowing what to go after that isn't quite ready for them yet, but where we can come in and add value and develop nice cash flows from these advanced projects in a short period of time, using our boots on the ground experience with people like Mr. David Scott.
So it seems like you're having the best of both worlds, because you have the knowledge, but you have a tremendous leverage when that knowledge really materialize. Would that be a fair assumption?
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's a fair assumption.
Yeah, and you mentioned,
and if I
go ahead.
If I may just add to that, Jacob, I think that there's tremendous validation that comes, because obviously one of the concerns that an investor who might buy the stock today has is, how are they supposed to do their due diligence? How are they really supposed to? I mean, there's no research coverage, there's no analyst coverage, but what we do have is that validation that comes from the very deep due diligence that Barrick did a year and a half ago. Barrick paid 27 cents for 5.5 million shares. I mean, our last trade is 17.5 cents. So, the viewers today can go out and buy shares, 40% cheaper than Barrick bought them a year and a half ago. We have the richest man in Tanzania who's paying 22 cents for his first tranche, 24 cents for his second tranche, and 26 cents for his third tranche. And so obviously the amount of due diligence, which has come from the richest man in Tanzania and the biggest mining contracting business in Tanzania, is so much more than the average person can do from a due diligence perspective. So I just wanted to remind the viewers today that there is a great opportunity in a fairly illiquid market, and gold has come down about $150 in the last 2 weeks, and that has hurt all of the mining shares, gold shares. Now is really just a really opportune time to get involved.
And to wrap it up here, I mean, you mentioned exploration and production. Would you be for sale at this stage? I mean, you
No.
also elaborate to the share price. The simple answer is no.
No, the simple answer is no. And if you go back to one of the first slides that we showed with that kind of what the stock price does through the development cycle, we are at the bottom of those cycles, and we're now funded with the transaction that we did with Taifa Group. So I mean, we're significant shareholders as well, and we think we have a tremendous amount of value creation to do in both the short and midterm, as we continue to advance the Mwelo project towards production, and then continue growing the Tembo deposit with this initial upcoming maiden resource that will be out in the near future.
Excellent.
And if I may just add to that, for when we sold 5.5% of the company to Barrick at 27 cents, approximately a year and a half ago, at that time we had the opportunity to sell the company. We certainly could have taken a walk at that point, but we felt that was the best of both worlds, to really have them come in and validate what we're doing, but also to have them as a partner, to have them as a strategic advisor, but for us to be able to go after the elephant. I should remind the viewers that elephant is Tembo in Swahili. So we are certainly looking for the Tembo, or more than one Tembo, as we embark going forward.
Yeah, excellent. That was good, because the symbol is also the front of an elephant. The next milestone, the next update. What do you want us in the market to be looking for?
You want to take that, Simon?
Well, I think there's a number of things. I mean, that we owe the market as far as updates. I mean, we certainly want to update the market on Barrick partnership. We recently received an update from Barrick, which we will be press releasing in the near future. We've got the maiden resource estimate that's coming out of the Tembo project. We have the Mwelo project closing. We have the Dora project closing. There's really just a pipeline of news in the upcoming months as momentum starts to pick up, and we work towards pouring our first gold in less than 12 months from now.
Interesting. So the next year would be very interesting, I take it. So if there would be any more questions, where and to whom should I address that? Do one go to your website and there is an info page, or to what do one do?
I mean, I'm happy to engage with any investors who ever want to talk about Tembo. So you can certainly reach out. My email address is just my first initial S, my last name Benstead, Benstead @tembogold.com. We are, often posting on Twitter and on Instagram, on YouTube. But the longer answer is that we do plan on, having more robust marketing. This is really the first. We're a little bit rusty in presenting. This is really like the first opportunity that people are having to hear about this new evolving story, and we'll be talking a lot more about that new evolving story. There's going to be more to report going forward.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, we wish you the best of luck. Extremely interesting gold development in Eastern Africa, where all the stars align. They should be extremely interesting. So thank you so much, and thanks anyone who has been viewing and anyone who has put forward a question. So we'll see you the next time. Thank you.